So good morning, everybody. I'm Noelle Akin from Petitti Garden Centers. I'm sure Julie sent out the handout, which we call our garden guides on common holiday houseplants. And then also I have my PowerPoint. So I'm at our Oakwood Village location. Our corporate office is just across the parking lot here. And I'm going to take you on a live tour of the holiday plants today. But I was a little bit worried about my computer connectivity with the internet. So what I want to do first is I want to take you through just the first few slides of our holiday houseplants presentation. The reason being is it is very general to start out with. The light, the watering, the humidity. Don't get me wrong, every plant has a little bit of a different need, if you will, similar, but a little bit different. So I was going to take you through those steps first, and then I was going to take you plant by plant as we get them. And actually, I have the greenhouse department manager is here, and he's unsleeving poinsettias as I speak. So anyway, we'll get started with this. And everybody can see the presentation okay? Yes, good.
Yes.
So again, as I mentioned, we're going to go through light requirements, watering needs, soils, household temperatures, humidity, and also the 3 Ps. So that's going to be your potting, your propagation, your pruning, okay? So we'll go through those first things. And these types of tasks or maintenance that you need to do, this applies to all house plants. So this is, you know, encompassing every indoor plant that you do grow inside the house. So just keep that in mind. The first thing that we talk about is light conditions. And whenever you're growing a plant, you need to grow it in a proper place where it will do well. Yes, you can grow plant material in less ideal conditions. However, they will never perform the way that you want them to, and they will always be more maintenance if you stick them in the wrong place. That goes for outdoors in the garden and inside in the home as well. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with your light conditions, especially. So first of all, full sun conditions. That is going to be a very sunny side of the house, where you have, you know, open windows, there's no obstructions, there's no curtains, especially your southern, your eastern, and your western exposures, okay? So basically 4+ hours a day of direct sunlight, so 4 or more, and this would work for most of your flowering plant material, your cacti and succulents, anything that needs a high amount of light to continue to bloom. And of course, in Northeast Ohio over the winter, obviously light levels are very low. It's very cloudy. It's very, you know, obviously snowy, rainy, all those types of things. So we don't have ideal lighting over the winter time, but when you have a plant that requires full sun, that's the type of aspect that you want to stick them near, you know, the window, right close to the window, not pushing against the window, because cold glass can also cause burn, but getting them close enough to sunny windows would really, really help. Bright light. So this is bright indirect lighting. This would be through a north window. So your northern exposure, you get wraparound light from the east and the west, but you never get that true direct light into the windows. And we like bright light aspects for a lot of different plant material, especially colorful foliage plant material. So going to the poinsettia, which is our traditional holiday plant, they actually are a bright light plant where it's the bracts that are colorful, their leaves that are colorful. So that bright light sun condition, that northern exposure is ideal for them. However, you could stick them in an east or a southern or a western window, but you'd want to pull them away from that window about 5-6 foot so that they're still getting, if you will, they're getting light, bright light, but they're not getting direct sunlight, which could ultimately burn some of the foliage, believe it or not. So that's your bright light condition. Or if you had a lace curtain, or you had like a diffusing material, that type of curtain, that could be used in front of the window, and then you could place them closer to the window if you wanted to. Medium light is going to be, again, moving back away from the windows, deeper into the room where you do want to grow the plants. So again, middle of a bright room, this would be equivalent to, like, let's say 12 to 14 hours of fluorescent lighting. So this is often, medium light is kind of like when you are in your office, and office, home, but typically offices and schools, like medium light, fluorescent lighting for most of the day. That's what you're talking about. Okay. And then the low light condition is just enough light to barely read by. So dark corners, hallways, rooms that don't have windows, that's your low light condition. And there's plenty of plants that grow well in low light conditions. It's just that they tend to be green, because obviously with lesser light, you don't have the opportunity to produce those pretty colored pigments that do come out in a colorful foliage plants. So as you get lower in the light levels, there's less and less and less plants that bloom. So a low light plant that blooms would be something like a white peace lily. I'll show you those. So peace lilies, they don't bloom well in low light conditions. You can move them up to like a medium indirect lighting or a bright indirect lighting to kind of force them to start blooming better for you. But again, low light conditions are typically just foliage plants, and they're usually, different shades of green, but nothing less, nothing other than that. Okay. So that's light conditions. So just remember, you want to have the right light for your plant to be successful. And then, of course, watering is always a huge question. How much, how little, how often. And I'm going to tell you, by all means, the best thing that you can do is make sure that your plant drains well. Okay, so drainage is really key here with watering. You want to make sure that the plant is always being watered, and then the water is draining away from that plant material. It's never sitting in water. It is, always, the roots are always becoming dry after a watering. We tend to kill plants with kindness, and it usually means overwatering or too much watering. And that can be very, very hard on plant materials, especially as we move into the winter months. Your watering maintenance on plants, indoors and outdoors, is always going to change with the seasons. So as the day length shortens, your watering maintenance should be less. However, we tend to obviously heat our homes in the winter, and that dry circulating air can really play a part in the watering maintenance as well. You probably aren't watering as often, but you might have to increase the humidity a little bit more around that plant material, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But again, the watering, you have to be careful. So I always recommend with watering, you want to water thoroughly. So you're thoroughly moistening the soil with your water. Normally, I like to have a just tepid water. So what I'll do is I will fill the watering can or cup or whatever you're using, fill that at night before I go to bed. And then overnight, what happens is all the chlorine and everything that we put in our water for our teeth and so forth, that will actually evaporate. Okay. And then the next day, when it's household temperature, that's the best type of water to use. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, there are some plants that like a distilled water, but for the most part, that household temperature tepid water that's kind of just set out overnight is going to be really the best bet for you. Yeah. Okay. So you thoroughly moisten the water, the soil. You let the water drain through the drainage holes. And then you do that one more time. You repeat and you thoroughly moisten the soil again. Let the water drain through the drainage holes. That is a thorough watering. You take that plant and you put it back to its spot. If it's a large floor plant that you're not moving around, then you want to make sure that you are thoroughly watering and there is a drip tray or a saucer underneath that plant that you can see the water come out and you can see that the water is getting absorbed as needed. After about a half an hour to an hour, if that water is still there, you actually want to discard it. Okay. So thorough watering is very key. And I'll always say the best moisture meter is going to be your finger. You get it deep to about the first knuckle. And if your plants are feeling dry at the first inch and they're starting to look like they're slightly wilting, that's a good indicator that they probably need to be thoroughly watered again and then put back in their place. The other thing that we like to recommend is pick up the pot. When the plant is real light and obviously the soil is probably dried out, there's not a lot of moisture there, it's going to have a lighter feel to it. So then you thoroughly water and then you put it back in place and you feel how heavy it can be when it is thoroughly watered. So just remember those tips. Always keeping plants on the slightly dry side is easier to recover than if you overwater and the root system starts to rot. That is very, very hard to correct. But if the plant is slightly dry and you just need to thoroughly water again, usually plants will bounce back much better from that kind of condition. So drier side is always better than wetter. Okay. I was going to mention with watering techniques, you can always water from the bottom. At the greenhouse, we grow, I would say probably close to 80% of the plant material on flood floors. So that means the plants sit on the floor, we open up the water, it floods the floor system. The plants that need water will absorb it from the base of the pot. The plants that don't need it will sit there, okay? So bottom watering is highly recommended for things like African violets if you grow them, but it can be utilized for a lot of different plant materials. So bottom watering is always a really healthy way to water. That way you're not getting water on any of the foliage or any of the flowers, which can ultimately cause some fungal issues, some spotting, those types of things. So again, it's fine to water from the base if you'd like to try that as well and have the plant absorb from the base of the pot. There's a couple different watering systems out there. So there's lots of pots that have what they call a reservoir, a watering reservoir. And so they're available at garden centers and they're very nice to have, especially if you are not always kind of, tinkering with your plants or looking at your plants daily. It's nice to have that reservoir system, especially if you travel and so forth too, because they'll always be able to absorb some water from the bottom of that reservoir. So that's nice to look for. And then there's a lot of water meters out there too. So if you always find yourself maybe overwatering or just getting to that point where the plant is too dry and it really had a hard time coming back, I would always suggest like a water meter to stick in the pot, and then you can see kind of where you are on the water scale, and that's real helpful. Sorry, we have some radio traffic going on right now. Next slide is the soil. Believe it or not, all your houseplants want potting soil. The reason being is potting soil is not a dirt at all. It's really not a soil even. It's peat moss and vermiculite and perlite. And the reason we have those three components in potting soil is because it really adds to the drainage. Remember when I was talking about watering, drainage is the key. So what happens with peat moss is it will absorb the moisture for a short amount of time, keep it around the root system as the root system is utilizing it quickly, and then it starts to dry from there. So that's why peat moss is used. And then the perlite and vermiculite are really there for soil space and air space. So they create those spaces around the root system, and it's just a lot easier for that drainage to occur and the roots obviously to grow out into the soil. So obviously airspace is important too, so they get good air exchange into the root systems. But again, it's really just to kind of support the roots, have it be well draining, have it be, if you will, aerated. So again, it's always really nice. Just be aware that, like, if you're using a Petitti potting mix, that we don't pre-moisten the soil. So lots of times you'll open potting soil and it's really fluffy, and that's all the peat moss that has like dried in there. And so I just take a spray bottle and I spritz down the top layer and kind of mix in a little bit of moisture into the potting soil. So it's easier to work with. And when it's pre-moistened, then when you actually pot up a plant and you water it, the soil doesn't bubble over the top of the lip of the pot and obviously all over the saucer or the table or wherever you're working. So that's really good to just pre-moisten your potting mix before you start potting your plants up, okay? Watering space, this last bullet on this slide, is at the top lip. Give yourself about an inch of watering space. Reason being, again, is you go ahead and thoroughly moisten that soil, and the water and the soil, if you don't give yourself that space, the water and soil will start to bubble over the lip of the pot. So that inch of soil space, that's a good thing to have, okay? So you know your water is going into the soil every time you water, okay? Last couple of things here, we'll talk about temperature and humidity. So temperatures for most household plants, they like household temperature. So normal household temperatures, anywhere from like the 60 to 80 degree mark. When we drop below 50 degrees, unfortunately, like myself, my household right now, I don't have electricity. So right now, when I left the house, it was about 48 degrees. So my tropical plants are not really happy right now. But if you drop below the 50 degree mark, things will just start slowly but surely kind of wanting to, if you will, sort of die back, curl up, that type of thing would start happening. So again, above 50 degrees is always really good. I don't think too many of us keep our thermostat at 50. So that normal 60 to 80, pretty good. If you keep it at 80, you like the tropical conditions, which is fine, because a lot of tropical plants will enjoy it too. So that's fine. Let's see. The only plant material at this time of year that we like it to be cooler, and you might end up storing some of these plants in the refrigerator, believe it or not, are the paper whites and the amaryllis bulbs or hyacinth bulbs. If you're forcing those bulbs right now, they're very easy to force. You can plant them in gravel. You can place them in water vases. You can plant them in soil as well. And they actually will bloom and last much longer if you can keep them on the cooler side. So if you do have a bright window, but maybe it's a little bit drafty, that's a great place for those types of plants because they're getting the cooler temperatures. Just make sure you're rotating the bulbs every day because they will move and go towards the sunlight wherever it is. So they'll bend and kind of keep on moving. So keep on rotating them so they keep growing straight. I have this note here. It's beneficial to have a 10 to 15 degree drop in temperature at night. That's good for your energy bill, but it's also good for a lot of winter flowering plants. And I'll touch on it in a little bit, but orchids, especially the moth orchid or Phalaenopsis orchid, those orchids will actually set buds and blooms with that cooler temperature at night. So that really does help some of the processes and the plant materials just become better bloomers for you. So that's typical of a lot of orchids. They like it warm during the day and then a little bit cooler at night. Okay, and then humidity. This is a really, really hard thing to control in the house. Goodness knows, with circulating furnace air in our homes right now, it gets very, very dry. So ideally, we're talking 80% or more humidity. So if you have a humidifier in the house, that's great. But lots of times you hear that people will grow their houseplants in their bathrooms because they get that increased humidity. That's a great thing for them at this time of year. I will have to say humidity is easily accomplished by just producing a humidity tray. So basically what you do is you take your potted plants and their saucer and you actually put them on a tray of pebbles, maybe like an inch of pebbles, and you always keep that tray filled with water, okay? If you're watering your plants and the water goes into the drainage holes and out into the humidity tray, that's okay. You're filling it, so it keeps that humidity around the plant material. It's also really good to place a number of plants together so that you have humidity. They kind of create and kind of encompass each other in humidity. So it's good to cluster your plant material together as well. That kind of helps them. Keeping them in the bathroom, in the kitchen, if you're cooking, that usually will increase the humidity as well. So that's always a good spot for some house plants. And then spray misting. You can spray mist, and it's, you know, it's a great thing to do. However, spray misting, you really want to make sure you're doing this in the morning, that you're not doing it in the afternoon or evening, because again, water droplets sitting on plant material can really cause some other issues. Again, spotting, disease issues, those types of things. So if you're going to spray mist, you can do it, you know, every day, every other day, however often you want to, but you want to make sure you do it in the morning, positively, so they can use that air, or it evaporates, to create that humid condition for them. Always avoid your heater vents. So keep the plants away from any of your venting areas and try to avoid drafty areas. So especially like the entryway, the most often entryway that you use in and out of your home, try to avoid that area for placing plant material as well. Because again, when that cold draft comes in and it's below 50 degrees, you'll see your plants react to, you know, that colder temperature. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to mention here is plant food. And plant food, folks, you don't need to feed during the winter months, so that's really good. Most of the holiday house plants that you come across, they have been fed, they are blooming. You don't normally feed plants when they're in bloom like that, full bloom, budded and blooming. So again, you don't have to worry about it. The only couple plants that you really could do, or excuse me, feed, would be like an orchid. We used to have an orchid grower up in Mentor. He has since passed, but he would have all different kinds of orchids ready for us and full blooming, year round. And I always asked him, "What's your secret?" And he said, "I just feed the heck out of them." So orchids, if you want them to bloom and bud up and continue to bloom for you, typically we recommend feeding weekly. So you are taking like an orchid food, but you're using like a 50% concentration, and then you could put that in the water as you're watering your orchids. Okay, so that's something to think about. African violets would be the same thing. If you want to keep your African violets blooming, they also, you know, getting fertilized weekly is always really nice. So there's different fertilizers out there, folks. If you want to use a different fertilizer for a different category of plants, there's orchid food, there's cactus food, there's, you know, lots of different options. But it's really up to you and what you've had success with. I'll always say that liquid foods are always going to be more maintenance, where you're going to have to apply them a little bit more regularly, maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month, you know, over the growing season. Whereas Osmocote is pictured there, Osmocote you would be applying once every 3 months, you know, for the growing season. So again, just some options there, but anything will work. And I think a lot of people try different things and have success with different formulations. That's why there's so many fertilizers available out there, but it all kind of depends on, you know, what you've tried and what you've had good success with. Okay. Growing season, by the way, April to October. So if you start feeding, you know, middle, end of March, that's okay. It's usually when the day length starts to increase, you start to see your plants perk up. That's really a good indicator that, hey, you know, let's start feeding them. And you go all the way until the fall. So that's really good to keep in mind. The potting, again, so we talked about repotting using a potting soil mixture, okay? Make sure when you're repotting, this really, you will be most successful in the spring. I don't want you to repot any plants during the winter. They're not actively growing. Hopefully they're kind of on the dormant side with the lower day length. So again, repotting in the springtime is great. Taking the plant out of the pot, selecting a pot that's maybe an inch or two larger in diameter than the one you have now, scoring the roots, breaking up the roots, pruning any roots that are bigger than the size of a pencil, typically, removing those, and then repotting the plant, making sure it has drainage, going ahead and using fresh potting soil in and around that plant, and you'll be fine. Propagating also is most successful for houseplants in the springtime. You can experiment a little bit over winter. You'll have very, very slow progress over winter. But again, if you start propagating in the spring with leaves or root cuttings or what have you, you'll notice a big difference because the plants start to actively grow, and then you'll have better results. So just keep that in mind. But of course, you can try that now if you want to, just slower results. Always prune with sterile tools. I always put that in there. Make sure that you clean your pruners, your scissors with rubbing alcohol so you're not spreading anything from one plant to another. This includes insects or disease. And then just make sure, you know, as you're making your rounds around your plants, you're removing anything that's dead, damaged, diseased as soon as possible. And don't be afraid to take a flower, and then their little stem underneath there is called a petiole. So take the flower and the petiole back to that main stem and you'll be ready to go. And I'm going to show you some examples of that, but that's always really good. It helps the plant produce faster, more flowers, more blooms. Okay, we're going to go to the poinsettias, and I'm going to kind of bop over here. Okay, let me see if I can see. Are you guys looking? There we go. So I'm going to show you really quick what a healthy poinsettia looks like. When you're selecting a poinsettia, you want to make sure that the bracts are, you know, really colorful, very, very nice, and that the center where the flower is actually budded and just starting to open, like this one. So you just start to see the pollen right in the center, but there's lots and lots of closed buds, which means that this has a really good, you know, longevity here that's going to be in the house. You want to make sure the bracts are nice and clean. You know, there's no tears, no rips, no cuts, and everything is looking really good, not wilting either. Uh-oh. It looks like I'm losing my connectivity for the PowerPoint, but poinsettias, as far as light is concerned, we talked about bright light, no problems whatsoever, bright indirect lighting, 55 to 75 degrees. Again, that's why it's so important that you cover your poinsettias, place them in a warm vehicle when you are out and about, and also taking them home almost immediately after that. The reason being is under 50 degrees, they don't like that. You'll start to see yellowing, curling, you know, leaf drop, all those types of things happening. And also when you get them to where they're going to be, take that plastic sleeve off of them, because the plastic sleeves will trap ethylene gas, and ethylene gas makes plants age faster. So again, all these types of things happen. The foil pot cover, they're so pretty, they're very, very nice. However, they don't let the water drain. So just be careful. We often say poke holes in the bottom of the foil cover, put a saucer underneath so you know that the water's draining out of that foil cover. If you want to use the foil cover as like a drip tray, you can do that. Just make sure, obviously, there's no holes. You're protecting your carpet, your flooring, what have you, where you have this poinsettia, the tabletop, and so forth. I totally lost my presentation. Okay, let's see here. So everybody, I'm sorry, the presentation got lost, but I'm going to kind of keep going with it. And then you all should have copies because I sent all of the information.
No, well, I'll try to pull it up. Because
Okay.
I have it, so I'll try to pull it up. If you keep
Thanks,
going.
Julie. So needless to say, with the poinsettias, the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that you can water them with ice cubes. A lot of people have been watering plants with ice cubes with good success, poinsettias, orchids, that type of thing. The only thing that I recommend is the tip is usually 1 ice cube per inch diameter of pot. So if you have a 6-inch poinsettia, it would be 6 ice cubes. But needless to say, with that happening, what you're going to do is, I don't like to put ice right on the top of the soil. So if you have 6 ice cubes, you put them in a bowl, a glass, what have you. Let them melt a little bit and then apply them to the poinsettia. You could do that, and it's really not a problem. The other thing is a lot of people think that they're super high toxicity, that, people could die from consuming them. It's actually lower toxicity than you think. You can get like a skin irritation from poinsettias because they do have that milky sap. So needless to say, do be careful. I'm just gonna do like a lower bract. So again, that sap can be an irritant, a skin irritant, but your pets and your people would have to consume a lot of leaves in order to really have a problem with this. So, if they are chewed or bitten by animals, by pets, definitely wash them, but it's still considered toxic, but it's lower toxicity than what everybody usually says. So just so you're aware of that. And then there's easy to care for after the holidays. We do have a lot of gardening guides on PetittiGardenCenter.com. I have a video that we're going to release here pretty soon about care for the poinsettias after the holidays too. So that's going to be coming real soon. Christmas cactus. I'm going to move. Where do I have them? Oh, I found some. Bear with me. So as a cactus plant or a succulent plant, you can move them into a pretty bright light condition. And I'm going to show you, we're just starting, most of these are just starting to open. And so they do like a partial shade outside, which is actually 4 to 6 hours of sunlight. And they do a nice job of growing indoors as well. So 2 bright light indoors. So you can have them in sun inside, but you can have them in that indirect bright light as well. I always recommend you can grow them indoors over the summer, but they do great outside in those partially shady conditions. And what we'll do is we'll normally leave them outside until mid-October. The reason being is you are exposing them to cooler temperatures in the evening, and what that does is it makes them set their buds. It's actually the shortening day length, but also the cooler temperatures make them react that way, so they'll start setting bud, and they do a really good job of doing that. So if you've never done that before and you've had trouble with them blooming for you, you want to try that. So placing them outside, under cover, like under an overhang or a porch, and then going ahead and letting them get exposed to those cooler evening temperatures, it's awesome. Really works really well. Propagating wise, no problem. You could actually, I wouldn't propagate them now when they're budded like this, but you can usually take like 1 to 2 nodes or more, and you can place them, you can literally just kind of break it off. And one of the keys with cactus. Oop, come on. One of the keys with cactus is you want to make sure that these dry out or callus. So what we'll do is we'll just sit them on the pot for about a week, and then they kind of dry and make a callus at the bottom, and then we go ahead and we just replant them into the pot. And that's really, they're such an easy plant to propagate. Again, I wouldn't do it now when they're all budded like this, because all the energy is going to go towards the flowering versus making new roots. So just be aware of that, but they do a very, very nice job propagating. And then if you do see kind of wrinkly leaves, they're not succulent. They're starting to wrinkle, become pruny. If they start turning red, which happens a lot, they are getting too much light and too much or too much heat. Okay, so do keep that in mind. These are such long-lived plants, folks. I mean, we've had customers come in, you know, they have 50-year-old plants, they have, you know, 60-year-old plants and more. So but just remember that there are a couple different types of Christmas cactus. There's actually a November cactus, Thanksgiving cactus, and also Christmas cactus. They look very similar. The Christmas cactus has these little points at the sides of their leaves. If you see those, they're very, very pointy. And the Thanksgiving cactus, they're a little bit more rounded. And then the Easter cactus has a very different shape. It's kind of sort of scalloped on the leaf. So needless to say, you might have a Thanksgiving cactus or a Christmas cactus. They are both very, very similar. All three of them grow the same way, so no problems there. Okay. And then the topiaries. Oh, let's see. I don't have them nearby, so I'm gonna just go over these really quickly, and I'll show you in a bit. So for topiaries, most of these plants are in the cypress family. So they really do, or juniper, or ivy, or rosemary. So they really do want a lot of sun. So as much sun as you can possibly provide, full sun outside to bright indirect lighting inside. And then cooler temperatures. These plants really would prefer to be on that cooler side. So you can keep them with the amaryllis, you can keep them with the paper whites, you can keep them with cyclamen, I'll show you those, but they all like to be on that cooler side. Spray misting, keeping them nice and moist as far as humidity is concerned. But then just remember, you know, they all represent different things. And so that's why you see more topiaries at this time of year. So ivy is eternity, rosemary, remembrance. The lemon cypress are just, oh my gosh, they're so aromatic. They're wonderful to have. Pet every day, release that aroma. And then the olive trees are peace. So again, just some cute plants, but I'll show you those in just a bit. Amaryllis, I do have them here. And as far as the amaryllis is concerned, I would say bright light for them. I don't want you to put them in too much sun because they will turn and they'll bloom faster. So again, trying to keep those amaryllis cooler is better. So bright indirect light, rotating the pot, as I mentioned before, cooler temperatures. Here we go, I'm just trying to turn them. And so these amaryllis are planted with some soil and then gravel. And if you look, the neck is still, the top of the bulb should be exposed, and the neck should be exposed out of the soil. So normally what I say is plant about half of the bulb in the soil, top with gravel around it, or you could do moss, or you could do, you know, Spanish mosses, or any kind of decorative stone that you'd like. And then, of course, leave that top neck and top part of that bulb out. Keep it dry, because that's really key. You don't want the water to go down into the neck and into the top of the bulb, where it'll get absorbed and it'll start to rot that bulb. So just be aware of that. What's interesting about amaryllis is everybody wants to get them to come back and bloom during the holidays. And I'm going to tell you that's quite a process, but the process is on your garden guide that I sent out. However, and Angela Petitti will tell you this, it is so much easier to just grow amaryllis as a potted plant, keep it as a house plant year round, maintain it as you would any of your other house plants, make sure that it gets some sun, and you don't have to worry about the dormancy. You don't have to let it dry out. You don't have to bring it back inside after 8 weeks. It's just a lot easier, and they bloom awesome. The other secret with the amaryllis is they like really small pots. So they like to be real condensed in that pot. So you really don't need a big pot for it. Even though the bulb's really big, they like to be kind of tight in there. So just be aware of that too. But they are just gorgeous, gorgeous plants. And obviously, I don't have any blooming just yet. They're all budded up. They're kind of cool in here. I'd say the greenhouse is, I don't know, we're right by the outdoor area with the door open. So I'd say probably 60 in here, maybe 55. And so that's perfect for them. They'll just grow nice and slowly, fill out, and do their thing. Okay, let me go next door to the cyclamen. And again, this is a great plant to couple with the topiaries, with the amaryllis and the paper whites, because they do prefer that cooler temperature indoors. Great for an area with drafty windows. And you see the cyclamen are just starting to kind of unravel. What we love about the cyclamen is that these are a bulb plant. There is a little bulb down at the base here, and they'll fill out. They're fragrant, and I'm going to show you a real quick tip with them. These guys do really well bottom watered, so if you want to put a saucer underneath there, they'll absorb the water from the base. And then if you have a spent flower, let me look here. I'm going to take one of these flowers off. I hope you can see this, but the spent flower, what you do is you go to the base of the stem and you pull it right out of the bulb, okay? And what that does is it makes that spot where it was growing, it makes that spot on the bulb produce more cells and actually produce another flowering stem. So don't cut them, just yank them right out of the bulb, and that'll keep them really productive. So that's always an easy way to take care of these guys. I will tell you, cyclamen, they'll wilt. Like, you let them go dry, they'll get very, very wilty. You'll see the leaves go down and the flowers go down. Water them from the bottom, let them absorb water, and they just pop right back up. So this is a plant, absolutely keep on the drier side. It will let you know when it needs water, and you can just water it and it'll keep on going for you. Okay, let's see here. Okay, orchids. We're just filling this part of the garden center, so we might go and find those guys, but I have Norfolk pine right by me, so I might do that next. So the moth orchid is available year round. It's called a Phalaenopsis orchid. It is the easiest to grow, and it is considered a beginner's orchid because of the fact that it does not need bright light or a lot of care in order to bloom, okay? So bright indirect lighting, I love them in a northern exposure. They do really well in an eastern exposure. Western and southern exposure are really too hot for them, so you really want to pull them away from those windows, and they like to stay cooler. So daytime temperatures, I have like 70 degrees, in this spreadsheet or in this presentation, but like 65 degrees is really nice. And if they can drop that 5 to 10 degrees in the evening, that's great too. But that's pretty cool. Medium green foliage is the key. If your foliage starts to turn like a dark green or an olive green, it's usually too much water, too much light. Okay, so just keep that in mind. They definitely love high humidity because they're a rainforest plant. So again, misting in the morning or keeping them on a humidity tray around other orchids, other plants is going to help. My pruning tip, I have to have the plant by me so I can show you. So we're going to skip forward and go to this next one, the Norfolk pine. So Norfolk pines are just classic holiday plant. We love them, to kind of decorate. They're kind of like our small Christmas tree in the house. bright indirect light, just like the poinsettias, cooler temperatures, so like the topiaries, the cyclamen, the bulbs, they really would prefer that. They can get into higher temperatures. You just have to keep the humidity in the water coming because they like to be evenly moist, okay? And I say pet your plant, and this has to do with any kind of evergreen, if you will, evergreen type plant that you're growing inside, pet it. Because when you pet it and the needles are soft to the touch, that means that there is plenty of moisture in this plant, okay? But when you pet it and you're starting to get poked by the needles, that is an indication that there is not enough humidity around the plant. You know, definitely check your soil moisture level. So really pay attention to that. And turn that plant, all these plants you want to turn regularly so they grow evenly. A lot of customers ask me, can we prune the top off the plant? You can, but it will start to split and it'll start to produce like 2 liters, 3 liters. Might look a little odd, but if you need to trim it, you can trim it. It's just not, it just never comes back to that nice tree shape again. What was the other thing? This picture down at the bottom is an actual Norfolk pine. They're indigenous to Hawaii. They grow like 100+ feet, you know, out there. So again, in the native environments, they do a nice job of growing and filling out. Okay, let me run. I'm going to run over to, I'll show you some things here first. We've got this lovely newer variety of poinsettia. This is called J'adore Hot Pink. And she really is very neat because the bracts are very, very narrow. And she has this beautiful white margin, thin white margin around the bracts. She's just really pretty. She's kind of a showstopper, if you will, and sort of new for us the last couple of years. So she's a really nice one. And then Ken, our department manager here, was unsleeving the fantasy poinsettias. So I'll show you those really quick. We've got beautiful, what we do is we usually take the white poinsettias or cream colored, and we'll go ahead and we'll kind of glam them up, if you will. Take a little bit of, this is in a vegetable oil based paint, floral paint, if you will. You'll have to see our spray get up at the greenhouse. The sprayer area is in one of the greenhouses at Casa Verde, our growing facility, and there's like plastic tarping everywhere. So it's this kind of booth made out of plastic tarp, and they go in and they hand paint all the fantasy poinsettias. So those are the fantasies. Okay, and then I'm gonna go over to the orchids really quick. Let me see. Sorry, this was the area where I wasn't getting good connection on my computer. Okay, let me set this down. Okay. Okay. So this is your Phalaenopsis orchid. And we call it the moth orchid, obviously, because it resembles a moth there. And what I was going to tell you about the Phalaenopsis orchid is you can get them to rebloom very, very quickly and get them to branch after they're done. So what you want to do is when your orchid is budded up and looking really, really nice, this first flower on the stem right here, this first flower is key. This is going to be the first flower to expire. And so when it expires, when any of your orchid flowers expire, there's like a scar on the stem, okay? And it would be right, let me see if I can get it. It would be right here. And so when this flower expires, you keep this spot, you know, in your back of your mind, because each flower will kind of expire in their own time. And Phalaenopsis orchids, if they're well taken care of, you know, they could bloom for 3 months, 6 months. I mean, they can bloom for a very, very long time. So when all of these flowers have actually expired, then you go back to where this first one was coming out and you prune just above where that flower scar was. Where this flower was coming out, there's going to be a little white mark. You prune right above it. And what the plant does is it will actually split and create two stems from there. And the Phalaenopsis orchids are one of the few orchid families that do that. And so you can get your Phalaenopsis orchid to really rebud and branch very, very quickly. Don't let them die back all the way down, towards the leaves. Keep those stems green. Keep, taking care of your plant, and they'll really produce very, very nicely. So we do that in propagation. I'll show you one that's already kind of branched. So that purple one actually has 3 branches on it. So again, just pinching them back right where that first flower, just above where that first flower was produced. It's like a really fast growing point. So those plants will push out. Okay. Let's see. I know I mentioned the peace lily, so I'm going to walk over there and just make sure everybody might be familiar with these, but you see them. So again, when I was talking about the peace lily, they're really commonly used year round, but we do use them quite a bit during the holiday and grow them quite a bit during the holiday. And they're the one low light plant that, will bloom, may not be spectacular blooms, but can produce blooms in a lower light level, lower to medium light level, and do really, really nicely. There's one other plant that we kind of talk about over the holidays, and it's a really cute one. It's called a frosty fern, and it's actually in the moss family. I'll show you that one in just a sec here. Do you see that? The cardinal's kind of sitting in there on the white tipped ferny plant. That is a frosty fern, and those are great for people who love to water, love to spray mist. They do grow kind of like a fern, high humidity. They don't need a lot of light. It could be a bright to medium indirect light, but they're really nice and just super soft. So they're nice to kind of pet in the environment. And then here's your lemon cypress. So again, with these topiaries, you want to make sure that you're petting them and making sure that they're nice and soft, releasing that scent every day or twice a day or however often you want to. And those are so nice. They just have a beautiful smell to them, air aroma. But again, always petting those plants and making sure that they, have that soft needle is key to know if that humidity is good in their area. So that's holiday plants in a nutshell, folks. You have the garden guides there. More information on PetittiGardenCenter.com, of course. And if you have any questions, please let Julie know. I can always help out. Does anyone have any questions right now? I'm sorry, I don't need to. Yeah, that's a great question. I would only repot if you are having trouble keeping that plant watered. What happens is, as the plant grows, the root system starts to take up more and more space in the pot. Sometimes you see the soil disappear, the roots start coming up over the top of the soil, and your watering, your watering maintenance has really increased quite a bit. It's not once a week anymore, it's like twice a week or 3 times a week, and you're thinking, what the heck is going on? And so that's really an indicator that it's probably time to repot that plant. Again, all plants grow differently in all different environments, so it's definitely not yearly. You don't have to do that at all. It's just when you start to have those issues with watering, keeping them watered, keeping the soil moist. Those are usually the times where you think, I've got to repot this.
That was so informational. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So everybody, I wish you, again, a safe Happy holidays. I know it's, not going to be the same with all the conditions that are happening, but please be safe and enjoy your families and yeah, be well.